This podcast is sponsored by Blackout Coffee. Kickstart your morning with a hot cup of American-made Blackout Coffee. Family-owned, premium coffee, fresh roasted, and get this, shipped out within 48 hours of roasting. It's almost straight from the roaster to your doorstep, or your stoop, or your patio, or whatever you've got. Go to blackoutcoffee.com, promo code PDB, for 20% off your first purchase. It's Thursday, 8 February. Welcome to the President's Daily Brief. I'm Mike Baker, your eyes and ears on the world stage. Let's get briefed. We'll kick off today's show with an update from the front lines in Ukraine. Despite Ukrainian forces facing mounting pressure, they have carved out a significant victory in their maritime campaign against the Russian Navy. Later in the show, we'll take a look at a concerning new report from an Iran watchdog group, which states that the Iranian regime now has enough weapons-grade uranium to build a nuclear weapon within, and here it comes, a week. Plus, with the failure of the Israeli aid package in the Republican-held House, the Senate is preparing to advance its own clean foreign aid bill, and it looks like some Senate Republicans may be on board. And in today's Back of the Brief, we'll continue our coverage of the Republican presidential primary in the U.S. with an embarrassing defeat for former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. But first up, the PDB Spotlight. An update from Ukraine centers on the escalating conflict in Avdiivka, a town in the Donetsk region. Before the war, Avdiivka was home to some 32,000 residents. The battle for the town has been intense, with Ukrainian defenders enduring heavy losses while inflicting significant casualties on Russian forces. Last November, British military intelligence reported that the combat in Avdiivka was among the deadliest for Russia since the war began. Recently, Russian forces have been advancing, and Ukrainian defenders are facing an increasingly perilous situation as their hold on the town weakens. The Ukrainians attribute their setbacks to Russia's overwhelming manpower. They have about a 3-to-1 advantage, and a severe shortage of ammunition, exasperated by the reduction of U.S. military aid to Ukraine. The fall of Avdiivka, which many anticipate could happen in the coming weeks, would represent the first major Ukrainian city to be lost since the fall of Bakhmut last May. Such a loss would not only provide strategic advantages to the Russian forces, but also would serve as a significant boost to the propaganda efforts of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, while the situation on the ground, at least in Avdiivka, is growing grimmer, there's been one bright spot for the Ukrainians, really since the beginning of this war, and that would be its efforts against Russia's Navy, more specifically its Black Sea Fleet. The most recent blow against Russia's Navy came last week, when Ukraine sank a guided missile corvette called the Ivanovets. The ship was taken down in a lake in Crimea by 6 direct hits from Ukrainian surface drones. The implications of these naval losses for Russia, they remain a topic of debate. UK intelligence suggests that they'll impact the fleet's command and control capabilities. However, it's just the latest in a series of embarrassing defeats dealt to Russia's much-vaunted Navy, beginning back in April of 2022, with the sinking of the Black Sea Fleet's flagship, the Moskva. A Ukrainian Navy spokesperson noted that Russia has seen approximately 25 of its naval vessels from an initial deployment of 80 lost or damaged since the invasion began. Forbes analysis points out that the Russian Navy is shrinking, an uncommon trend globally, as it continues to lose ships faster than it can replace them. It's a solid result for Ukraine, which basically has no functioning navy. Coming up next, an Iranian watchdog group is sounding the alarm as the Islamic Republic has now stockpiled enough weapons-grade uranium to build a nuclear bomb within a week. Then later, the latest efforts to pass foreign aid for Ukraine and Israel are poised to begin in the U.S. Senate after a previous comprehensive bill failed a procedural vote. I'll be right back. Welcome back. As the Israel-Hamas war rages on, inflamed by Iran's funding, training, and arming of terrorists throughout the Middle East, an international watchdog is once again warning the world about Iran's nuclear capabilities. The Institute for Science and International Security published a report on Monday that the Iranian regime has enough weapons-grade uranium to build a nuclear weapon within just 1 week. The report added that the regime likely has enough weapons-grade uranium to produce 6 bombs, which they estimate would take Iran roughly 1 month to complete. As we've previously discussed here on the PDB, Iran has ample stores of 60% enriched uranium, putting them alarmingly close to the 90% threshold that is considered weapons grade. The Institute for Science and International Security's report states, quote, "The volatile situation in the region is providing Iran with a unique opportunity and increased internal justification for building nuclear weapons, while the United States and Israel's resources to detect and deter Iran from succeeding are stretched thin. Iran's nuclear weapons capabilities are more dangerous than they have ever been, while its relations with the West are at a low point." End quote. The watchdog group notes it would be relatively easy for Iran to further enrich their supplies from 60% to the 90% threshold. Not to be overly simplistic, but I think I'm about to. But moving from the 60% to weapons grade is essentially the easier part of the enrichment process. The report continues that Iran can, quote, "break out and produce enough weapons-grade enriched uranium for a nuclear weapon in a week, using only a fraction of its 60% enriched uranium," end quote. Notably, they add that this breakout could be difficult for inspectors to detect promptly if Iran took steps to delay inspectors' access, which they have always done, frankly. As the situation in the Middle East has deteriorated since the 7 October attacks on Israel by Hamas, Iran has refocused on their nuclear activity. The International Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA, warned in late December that Iran had tripled its production of highly enriched uranium after a months-long slowdown. The UN nuclear watchdog said they began noticing increased production just after Thanksgiving at Iran's Fordow fuel enrichment plant, which is built into the side of a mountain, like any good secret lair would be. IAEA officials then noticed increased activity at Iran's Natanz nuclear complex back on November 27th. Officials within the Biden administration said at the time that they were, quote, "greatly concerned," by the IAEA report, and that Iran has, quote, "no credible civilian justification for enrichment up to 60%. Now, if you think the Iranian regime is belligerent and destabilizing now, just wait for the day when they announce they have joined the global nuclear club. Okay, I want to shift our focus back to Congress, where Senate Democrats are making a play to salvage a foreign aid package as the hopes for a border deal crumble. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer held a previously scheduled cloture vote Wednesday on the controversial $118 billion border security package that includes roughly $60 billion in fresh aid for Ukraine and $14 billion in assistance to Israel. The vote predictably failed after Senate Republicans had rallied in opposition to the proposal on Tuesday. They had argued that the proposal, which had only just been unveiled Sunday evening, did not do enough to address the border crisis. They also objected to the lack of time that they were given to review the proposal and offer amendments. Now, while that vote was expected to fail, Schumer is following it up with a separate vote on the Israel and Ukraine aid packages, but it's stripped of the border security provisions. That may well happen sometime today, although given the current inability of either party to accomplish anything, there's no guarantee. The Biden administration gave their support to the strategy, saying it, quote, would protect America's national security interests by stopping Putin's onslaught in Ukraine before he turns to other countries, end quote, while also it would deliver humanitarian aid to innocent Palestinian civilians. Republicans appear split on supporting the foreign aid packages. However, some Republican leaders expressed optimism that their members would ultimately vote to advance the measures. Senate Minority Whip John Thune said the sticking point, however, would be whether Schumer allows amendment votes on the aid package. Republican Senator John Cornyn said, if we have a full amendment and a debate process, then I'm okay with that. But if Schumer is going to try to just deny any opportunity to offer amendments and jam it through them, I'm not going to support it, end quote. If the bill does manage to survive in the Senate, it's unclear if it has a future in the Republican-dominated House, where funding for Ukraine remains an intensely contentious issue. Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson said Wednesday, quote, "We'll see what the Senate does. We're allowing the process to play out, and we'll handle it as it's sent over. I have made very clear that you have to address these issues on their own merits," end quote. I have no idea what that quote means. Coming up in the back of the brief, I'll tell you about the major upset in Tuesday's GOP presidential primary in Nevada. The winner was a name that you may not recognize. In today's back of the brief, we've got a somewhat embarrassing moment for former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley in this week's Nevada GOP presidential primary. Despite being the only remaining major candidate on the ballot, Haley still managed to lose the contest with only 31% of the vote. Coming in first place with a little over 63% of the vote, and that's pretty impressive, was an up-and-coming promising politician known as none of these candidates, or also sometimes known as none of the above. Reacting to the defeat, a Haley campaign spokesman said, quote, "Even Donald Trump knows that when you play penny slots, the House wins. We didn't bother to play a game rigged for Trump," end quote. Now, the Nevada GOP primary is non-binding, which is why former President Trump chose not to participate. He was not on the ballot. Nevada will award their delegates based on a caucus that's being held today. Trump is competing in the caucus, while Haley has chosen to sit this one out. Yeah, I know. It's confusing. All of the state's 26 delegates are expected to go to the former president. On the Democratic side, as expected, President Joe Biden cruised to an easy win, capturing close to 90% of Democratic primary votes, essentially because he had no competition. One of the more entertaining aspects of the Democratic race, if it can be called that, is that after the DNC and party strategists worked very hard and ensured that there would be no real competition for President Biden, the media now treats each Democrat primary with breathless wonder, announcing that Biden won 97% in South Carolina, or almost 90% in Nevada. The Democrat Party worked relentlessly to keep their race a one-trick pony. And now they want folks to believe that the president is wildly popular because he's winning against no competition. I've said it before. I'm going to say it now. Politics in the states seems to be amazingly dysfunctional. Although, to be fair, Haley in Nevada did finish second to none. The next state on the Republican presidential primary schedule is Nikki Haley's home state of South Carolina. The latest polling in the Palmetto State, it's known as the Palmetto State, I'm not sure if you were aware of that, from Morning Consult, has Haley trailing Trump by 37 points, with Trump capturing a full 68% of respondents. And that, my friends, is the President's Daily Brief for Thursday, 8 February. If you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me at pdb@thefirsttv.com. I'm Mike Baker, and I'll be back later today with the PDB Afternoon Bulletin. Until then, stay informed, stay safe, stay cool.